Alright, so we're doing starter houses today. For this first one, I wanted to do something medieval with a windmill on it. I also had an idea of what sort of roof I wanted on it. I wanted to have a steep roof with one side really slanted. There's a lot of different ways to plan out your builds, and for this one, I decided to sketch it out on paper. Usually my sketches for builds won't look like this. I just got a bit carried away when sketching this one. What they'll usually look like is just a few flat views in pencil or something. They don't have to look good or anything, they just have to look like something that you can understand. Sketching is a good way to get the idea down of your build, especially if you already know how to draw, or if you're doing a larger build or something more complicated than you usually would. So in my case, I found it really helpful to sketch these out, just because I'm usually building in a larger style than this, so it helped to have something already figured out before I started placing any blocks. A little bit ago, I came up with a fairly small windmill design that's basically just some stairs, some fences, and some trapdoors behind it. I find that the trapdoors really help to solidify the windmill, even though you won't actually see them on first glance. I also really like how I got the roof down in this one. When you're doing slants like these, it can take quite a few tries to get it right. I find that it helps to start doing the curves in full blocks, before you start adding any slabs or stairs to smooth it out. I feel like this roof shape really helps to add the character to this build, because if I stuck with the standard 1x1 roof shape that a lot of people use, it'd make the house look like everyone else's first starter house, which would kind of take away the whole feeling. On this side, I knew I wanted to have a chimney, but I also decided to have it attach all the way down to a fireplace. The fireplace helps to add a bit more detail to the bottom of the build, and it's also functional for cooking your food. I wanted to show you this fireplace really quick because I found a way to semi-automate it. The way it works, right, is you put in the food that you want to cook, and you can close these trapdoors here so when the food pops out it doesn't leave the furnace. Then it will get sucked down by some hoppers and go into these barrels when it's done. I'm going to show you how to make it over here in this example furnace. So what you do, right, you take two barrels, or chests works also, whatever you want, and you place them both here. And then you can come behind and place the hoppers into the barrels. You gotta make sure that they're facing in and not facing straight down. And then you can take two more hoppers, place them on top of that, and then you can put your campfires on top of them. Now you can place your stairs to hide the hoppers, and finally you can place down your trapdoors. Whenever I'm not cooking anything, I like to keep these trapdoors open, just because it's nice being able to see the fire on the inside. The next house that I wanted to do was some sort of swamp hut. I took a lot of inspiration from the standard witch hut you find in swamps in vanilla. From this, I knew I wanted a elevated or at least floating platform on top of the water. I didn't really sketch this one at all, I mostly just blocked it out in concrete. This is because when I was going in, I didn't really know what I wanted, so I didn't really have an idea to sketch off of. I put the whole build on a decently sized platform in the water. This gave me a well-defined area to add a lot of decorations to the outside, which I think gives the build a nice feel, especially after I add a ton of plants and some gardens down there. I really liked working on the roof for this one. The messy roofs are really fun to work with, because one misplaced block really doesn't matter. To get these roofs down, it helps to set up a lot of guides in the roof. This makes it easier because you can sort of connect the dots in between each part of the roof. When you're doing a more rundown roof like this, you have a lot more freedom to do more abstract curves, because gravity is pulling down at the more worn down parts. Because all of the texture in the roof that makes it look run down helps to cover up any imperfections in the curve of the roof when you're making it. Making a roof like this is really good practice if you're just getting into making more abstract roofs. Another really fun part of this build was the big willow tree in the back. Before I added the tree, the build really looked plain in the back corner, so it really helped to cover up a lot of the build and add a lot more detail. It also helps to bring in a lot more atmosphere of the swamp into the build, and it makes it look a lot more overgrown. When I'm making my custom trees, I like to make the branches in concrete first. This is because it's easier to see, and I don't have to worry about which direction the wood is facing. If you're building in creative, I suggest that you do this too, then replace the blocks with wood afterwards. But if you're building in survival, I suggest that you do this with dirt, just because it's a lot faster to remove and it's easier to get. Alright, so the next one we're building is going to be a mountain house. And that's really all I knew about it. I knew I wanted a tower attached to it somewhere, and I wanted it to overhang off of a cliff. I did sketch out this build, but I didn't follow it too closely. Before I say too much about this actual build, I want to recognize, yes, I am using blackstone for the roof, and yes, you can get blackstone for a starter house. It really doesn't take that long to get to the nether, and you can make it there on your first night if you really wanted to. You do of course need a lava pool and a bucket, but those aren't that hard to find, but a lot of the blocks that you're going to be using on your starter house is dependent on where you are. For example, you might never find the wood type you want, or at least in time for your starter house. Alright, for this mountain house though, I made a wraparound deck for it, for the overhang. This deck is a good place for me to put a lot of details on, and it also makes the house look a lot more precarious than it actually is. Most of the house is going to be sitting on the mountain, and the deck's really going to be the only part hanging off. I was able to do a lot of smaller details that I really liked with this build. What I was going for at first was a medieval fantasy sort of build, which is why I had a castle tower on the left, but that didn't really work out. I ended up going for a more western sort of feel. What helped this out is I had a few wine kegs by the windows, using some scaffolding and a barrel. And it was also all of the spruce that I used for the house. One of my friends suggested that I replace the castle tower with a water tower. I was able to make a fairly good one that I like a lot, using barrels and some nether brick walls. I feel like the water tower was really the last straw into making it a western build. I haven't done anything in this small of a scale in quite a while. I had a lot of fun messing around with the much smaller details in a much more practical space. I also had a lot of fun messing around with the different kinds of environments that you can put the houses in. When the buildings are in a smaller scale, they seem to fit in a bit better with the vanilla environment. These smaller houses are also really good practice for putting in a bit more life into your builds. The smaller scale means that they're quicker to finish, and they're a lot less intimidating to start. If you're ever struggling to figure out what to do, I suggest starting one of these. They're really fun to just pound out in a few hours. If you're missing more of the larger builds though, I suggest clicking on this video to learn more about castles.